Cześć, tu Marta. Dzisiaj opowiem Wam troszeczkę o mikrobiologii i troszeczkę o tym, czym ja się zajmuję i o tym, czym zajmuje się nauka. Mam nadzieję, że spodoba Wam się, mimo że będę mówić w języku angielskim.
Hey everyone, I thought I'd do the entrance a little bit different today, so I hope you enjoyed the entrance from Marta, and stick around for more. Again, I'm Chris, I'm the host of Is It Just Speculation?
First of all, I'm a microbiologist, and I work with bacteria that can be used in biocontrol, which is an idea, a strategy to protect plants from plant pathogens and pests. And these bacteria just can be used as the protectors of our plants. So that's what I'm working on. But apart from that, I'm also a teacher. I teach students at my university. I teach them industrial microbiology. What I also do is I love to knit in my free time. I love learning languages. I love working on some graphic designs also. So that's what I do in general.
Awesome. Yeah, you talked about the languages, and I would imagine speaking different languages comes in handy when you're teaching, especially in a university where there's people from various backgrounds. Can you just tell everybody the different languages that you're familiar with? And do you consider science a language?
Definitely, like science is a language. I would say it's a very specific language that not many people understand, and it's something that we also learn. However, in general, I speak Polish, which is my native language, and I speak English, as you can hear, which I have been learning since I was 5, I believe. That's how early we start with it here. And I also know some German, which I started learning in high school, but then kind of ditched. And then I learned also some Italian, and that was because of my internship, which I did in Italy, and I just wanted to know the culture and the language. Also, the place where I was, Naples, is not big on English, so so I had to learn a bit. And then I just recently started learning Spanish, just for my amusement.
Yes. Do you find it hard to be in a place, when you went to Italy, did you find it hard to be in a place where nobody spoke either language that you knew?
It was quite hard at the beginning, but since Italian is very easy to learn, and also Italians speak with their bodies a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite easy for me to get into this vibe, this Italian vibe. However, also it was nice seeing people that they were very friendly, and they didn't judge me for not speaking. They were actually very happy if I could speak at least a bit.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it would be challenging for anybody to just completely take themselves out of their environment and go to a completely different place where you have to just basically start over, especially when you're trying to learn at a university or do an internship. So I definitely think a lot of people would be surprised to know that you speak different languages and that you're speaking a whole different language right now. Like, this is not your native language. So I think that's awesome. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So you said that you work on bacteria. I think a lot of people just think bacteria and they think bad because we're so used to being, hygienic and, using cleaning wipes to disinfect everything. How did you get into bacteria? And do you think bacteria just gets a bad rap? Like, do you think everybody just sees it as bad?
I think it's changing right now. I think we're starting to recognize that bacteria are not that bad, are not only our enemies, that they can help us. So first of all, I started by actually trying to kill bacteria. I started with searching for natural compounds from plants that the compounds that are somehow bioactive and like that can kill bacteria. But then I got into biocontrol, which is still killing bacteria, but with bacteria.
Yeah.
At least what the part that I do. However, we have a lot of different types of biocontrol, which not all of it involves bacteria, of course. But then I started killing bacteria with bacteria. I started working on beneficial bacteria, the ones that are friendly for plants, that are actually living together with plants in a symbiosis and provide many, for example, nutrients, can provide protection in many different ways, also not only by killing other bacteria, but also by providing specific by provide maybe yeah, I'll say it in another way, by taking up the niche that could be otherwise taken by the pathogenic bacteria
Hmm.
or fungi. So also they can make plants protect themselves, so they can somehow elicit the immune response of plants, which is also an interesting fact about these bacteria. So yeah, they are very friendly, and also we as humans and any other living organism is in fact inhabited by bacteria, which are our friends. And I think we are starting to recognize this as humanity finally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people probably know good bacteria from probiotics. And like there's a lot of talk about like a good microbiome. And I think people are starting to get more engaged in like what the differences are and like how you can probably take some bacteria that actually are beneficial to you. So I think it's really important the work that you're doing that kind of helps with the plant side of things. But those bacteria are good for the plant, but are there any dangers to people with those bacteria?
So in general, what we're trying to do, of course, is to make everything as safe for humans as it can be, right?
Mhm.
And in general, the bacteria just live on the plants, and what we are trying to do is to just isolate the bacteria that already live on plants and find the ones that can be actually helpful when, for example, applied to another plant, to our crops, in the fields. But there are concerns, of course, and that's why there are really a lot of studies done on such bacteria if we really want to use them. But as far as I know, it is much safer if we actually use bacteria to protect our plants than if we use, for example, some antibiotics or bactericides. We are doing a lot of studies
Mhm.
on bacteria and about making them safe for humans. There is, for example, I can tell you about an example that is quite known right now. It's the
Mhm.
most known example of biocontrol, really, and it's a very old example.
Sure.
So we use bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis, uh, called BT in short. And this bacterium can produce a specific protein that gets into the guts of insects, and um, it makes the insects unable to digest food. And if we put this bacteria on plants, the insects will stop digesting food, they will die, and they will stop also digesting our plants, because that's what we want to do. That's what we want to achieve. Um, and of course, there were a lot of concerns about how it would act on humans, right? Because if there is a protein that acts on insects' guts, that makes them unable to digest food, what happens if it gets into our digestive system? And it turned out that it's actually very safe for humans. There were a lot of studies, and it is very safe for humans. And also, we can engineer the protein in a way that it is only harmful for the pests that we want it to be harmful to. So
That's good.
yes, that we can, for example, save other insects that are also beneficial for our plants, for us, and only target the ones that eat our crops.
So is the hopefully the end goal, is it just a full replacement of chemicals? Like, why do we use chemicals right now if there are side effects?
In general, yes, it is. The goal is to replace chemicals, which we all know can have some effects on human health.
Mhm.
It's not also like very well documented, right? Because there are studies that just some studies show that yes, the effects can be like carcinogenic or whatever, and the other studies say that the effects, there are no effects of some pesticides, right, that we use. However, still chemicals are not the nature's way of protecting our plants, and we are trying to make it more natural and more safe. However, the why we still use chemicals is that it's because biocontrol is not very easy to apply,
Mhm.
and there are many problems actually with studies which require a lot of work, because applying one strain of bacteria, for example, is not that easy. We know that these bacteria can be overtaken by others, for example, uh, and it's just we're never sure if it will be effective. But what we can do, for example, what is the solution for it is mixing many strains of bacteria that are beneficial, but also all of this has to be tested in a chain of tests from the lab to the field, right?
Right. So
And yes.
so with bacteria being able to be in so many different places, but also having to be stable in the environment that they're in, would you have to go in and specifically change wherever you're applying the bacteria to, like location wise? Like if you uh, specified bacteria to be good working in somewhere like Texas, but then you want to do it also in Florida, do you have to change the way that bacteria is built? That way it's stable in both environments.
It's well, it's a difficult question actually, because the environment, first thing is the environment, like the climate, right?
Mhm.
It is the climate can be different. That's the first thing. But the other thing is what crop do we want to apply it to? Because bacteria can colonize, can be associated with plants, but for example, they can colonize some plants but not the others. It depends on
Yeah.
many different factors. So it actually has to be tested on different plants and probably in different climates too. So that's a lot of work.
So if we were to get the bacteria to a place where it's stable and we can apply it to different locations and different types of plants, are we thinking that the bacteria is going to be as good or maybe even better than the current ways that we do it?
We are hoping that they can be actually better, because they are more of not for okay, so they would not be a protection in a sense that they kill everything that
Mhm.
already infected our plants, but they would be a great prevention. And if we just use chemicals as prevention, uh, we know that it's not very sustainable. We know that it's not good for our health and our environment. So the, there are a lot of problems with it. However, if we use the specific bacteria that we know that normally already live on plants, probably some other plant that we want to use it on, and the plant is maybe, I don't know, in a different climate. However, if we study it and if we apply it, if it's effective, then it can be more effective because it can just protect the plants in many different ways. So as I said, it can elicit plants immune reaction, it can kill the pathogens, and it can take up their niche many different ways, and this all can be more effective than chemicals if we can use it well.
So we talked about it being studied in the lab. Is there any real world settings where they've already tried to implement it, and like have we seen any results from those yet?
Yes, yes, it's actually commercialized. Many strains are commercialized. With bacteria, it's not maybe not that popular yet, um, but it is, for example, popular with this Bacillus thuringiensis that I talked about.
Mhm.
It's something that is used normally commercially in the fields. There is also a fungus called Trichoderma cartianum, and there are some success stories of using it in the fields. But also, there are, for example, mm, insects that are used as such biocontrol, right? So insects eating other insects, or
Yeah.
yeah. So also these are commercialized, some of them. And yeah, bacteria too. We can buy bacterial biocontrol agents. There are a number of companies that sell them. As far as I know, in Europe, there are, for example, Coppert and BASF that sell these.
Okay. And what other ways do bacteria get used? Like, are there any other applications aside from protecting plants?
Oh, we use bacteria in many different ways. We do. So, of course, first one is in the fields that I like talking about. However, we use bacteria in our foods, for example,
Hmm.
for fermentation. So we wouldn't have yogurt or kefir or whatever milky product that is fermented if we
Hmm.
didn't have bacteria. So these are the lactic acid bacteria, the same ones that we also have in our guts. So uh, that we use as probiotics, for example, right? Uh, and yeah, they ferment our foods and make them even better. And also, fermenting foods is a cool story because it started as just a way to prevent our food from rotting, from
Hmm.
from getting molds, right? So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think a lot of people used to drink like things like wines and alcohol beverages whenever they're used to not be clean water, like a long time ago, of
yes.
course. So it was a lot safer back then to drink those things that had the good bacteria because they didn't have the bad bacteria. So is
Yes,
that kind of what you're
these
talking
are
about?
actually fermented by fungi, so by yeasts, right? And
Hmm.
yeasts are fungi; they are not bacteria. Mm. technically. That's just a technical thing.
Yeah.
However, this is also the fermentation type, which provides some safer environment, maybe maybe safer food for us, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that I've heard in the past, that I've spoken a little bit about, was the idea that bacteria can break down pollution. It's especially things like plastics. Is that something that you've heard about or you're familiar with at all?
Yeah, of course. Bacteria are currently, uh, at least as far as I know, they are investigated in many places for breaking up the pollution of microplastics, for example, but also
Mhm.
other types of pollution, of metal pollution, and such many different things. Uh, However, I didn't hear about any practical, any commercial use of them yet. But yes, they are being investigated, and they are found in many different environments.
Can the same idea that we're using bacteria to try to protect the plants be used for humans? Like, is there a way to basically give us good bacteria to where it fights off things where we don't need medicines?
I mean, that's probably what we're trying to do with probiotics, mostly.
Mhm.
Probiotics are there to help us digest food, but also to provide this kind of immunity from pathogens, at least in some ways, right?
Mhm.
That's why, for example, right now there is, at least in a scientific environment, in a microbiological environment, we are often telling people not to use too much of all these disinfectants,
Yeah.
and to not to use too much antibiotics, for example, because it also makes us more sterile, which is an easier environment for the pathogens to get in. so, so that's what we're also trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're trying to use probiotics. However, it's also not very easy for probiotics to get into our gut and actually start flourishing there.
Yeah, one of the weird things that I learned recently whenever I was talking to allergists on the podcast was, he was telling me about a study where they had parents that had pacifiers drop on the floor. Some of the parents would wash it off like normal, like in the sink, clean it that way.
Yeah.
And then some of the other parents would pick it up and basically put it in their mouth and clean it off and then give it to the kid. And what he was saying was the study showed that the ones that had the parents put it in their mouth and then give it to the kids versus cleaning it, like we probably would normally do, they had a better tolerance to allergies. And it was the idea that basically letting them get some type of germs gave them a little bit of a better defense against things like allergens.
Yeah, as long as there is not too many, right? There is
Yeah.
not, they are not in the amounts that can actually provoke a disease.
Yeah.
It's actually good for our immunity to be somehow boosted that way. I think it's also kind of evolutionary. So if we think about the people that were the hunter gatherers, right? They didn't have uh, showers or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or disinfectants, and they had to deal with all these soil bacteria and fungi and everything around us, and they had to deal with them with their own immune systems. Um, so now, if we take it away from us, of course, there's going to be some malfunctioning of our organism, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I was wondering about is if you were to put this good bacteria on the plants, in different situations, like how do you actually do that? Do you put the bacteria to germinate with the seed, or do you crop dust the bacteria just all over the field? Like, how do you actually put the bacteria in all the plants that you have on the field?
There are many different ways that are being explored, of course. So, of course, we have also many different ways of seeding, right? And
Mhm.
putting the plants in the soil and in a field. However, right now, to me, the most interesting way is to provide the plants with so-called suppressive soil, which is a soil that is already full of these bacteria, maybe not just one strain, but a mix of strains actually. Um, because right now we are also considering not that one strain is not the best way to protect anything.
Mhm.
Of course, we have to know one strain as well as we can to find all its benefits and so on. However, uh, as also we are in our microbiome, we have a lot of bacteria in us, and they work best when they are divergent, when we have a lot of divergent bacteria on us. And the same is for plants. So if we provide uh, the plants before seeding, even we make this suppressive soil. So, for example, we can add lyophilized bacteria, so dried bacteria,
Mhm.
add them to the soil, and then water the soil. This, the bacteria, they have this great ability to come back to life after being dried. That's what we also have in our probiotics, and uh, and that can provide the soil with some innate immunity, we can call it, right? Before
Yeah.
the plant is even planted.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like a pregnant person taking prenatals to like give them a boost before they're even born. Is that kind of like the idea?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Something like this.
Okay. Um, so one thing that always comes up when you're talking about bacteria, especially things like antibiotics, is resistance. Is there a worry that if we were to put this out and basically take care of all the plants and different farms, that they might build up a resistance to what we're doing and that we just end up making things worse?
In case of these so-called natural enemies, uh, I think it would not be that easy.
Mhm.
However, there is always a possibility that bacteria can get resistant to anything that can kill them, really. So they can start, um, for example, not only bacteria, but also other organisms that give our plants diseases, right? So, for example, also fungi. They can start producing things that kill off the bacteria that we wanted to use. Uh, and this would be such immunity. This would, but yeah, but also, for example, they can get resistant to the compounds that are produced right by the natural enemies. There is always such possibility, and this is also another another point that I would add to the discussion about the mixture of the organisms used in this suppressive soils on, or generally the as the biocontrol agents, right? Because if
Mhm.
we have a mix, then it's the probability of the pathogen getting resistant is much lower.
That's good that you kind of explained that, because I feel like a lot of people are just worried about if they do try to make a change that it's always going to make things worse. Because we talked a little bit about introducing some insects that eat other insects, and you
Yeah.
have different examples throughout time where people have introduced one thing to deal with another um, problem, and it ends up being that there's an invasive species after that problem is dealt with that you then have to figure out how to fix. And so people
Yes,
are always
yes.
worried about maybe causing another problem after fixing one problem.
Yeah, that is because that is actually a problem. That is something that we are also, as scientists, we are working on it. And always when we have just one agent, um, one factor, it will be easier for any microorganism to get resistant. So if we use one chemical also, that's
Mhm.
much easier for the pathogen, for the pest, for the weeds that we have on our fields, right? Uh, it's much easier for them to get resistant to it.
What would you say to somebody who maybe thinks that the chemical way is the better way to go? If they maybe say something like it's harder for a natural bacteria to get resistance to an artificially created protector than if it was a natural protector like you're talking about. What do you say to the people that think that the chemical way is probably the more effective way?
I would say that the problem is that actually for now, as we are now, it is still a bit more effective. So we are still developing. It's like biocontrol
Mhm.
is a bit a thing of the future because we are still trying to understand many things and chemicals, which is if we have like one chemical compound, it's well understood. We know how it works. It's easier, right?
Yeah.
However, in order to provide actual, actually sustainable plant protection, it would be much better to provide it with the natural protection, uh, so-called natural, because it's also like introduced, for example, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but the so-called natural enemies, which have actually evolved some systems, some mechanisms to that we can use to avoid, for example, our crops getting our weeds in our crops getting resistant to, or the pathogens getting resistant to.
So one thing I was wondering is, what is the science climate like where you're at? Because I know in the States, a lot of times science, whatever the results are and whatever the issue is, it usually gets split up into this or that, and everybody takes a side. And there's people that maybe would hear what you're talking about and saying, that's really good. It's good to be natural and not rely on chemicals. But then there's also the other side where they think going natural is like a hippie type of thing where it doesn't work and it's old and we have all these chemicals and science can fix
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
How
And
is
the
it in Poland?
chemicals are like more for now actually it looks like they are just cheaper, right? For example,
Yeah,
so to
yeah,
many people that's what very appalling, cheaper. However, in Poland, it's the same, really. So we are having a climate where we we see people being just black or white.
mhm,
I believe that's a lot is on the media, on how the media coverage of science looks like, and yeah, so what we see cannot be somewhere in between. Just like I say with biocontrol, we are just somewhere in between right now. uh, but uh, but yes, it's also black and white in Poland, and it's very hard to make people think that there are things that just have both benefits and disadvantages.
so what is the challenge of making a change like that? Because I know it's hard to get people to make change in general for anything, but talking about changing the whole industry to move away from chemicals to a more natural route where You have science to back up what you're doing, because it's not like a natural route of, let's say, something like holistic medicine, like where there's not
Yeah.
really any science behind it. But the things you're doing is natural, but it also has that science behind it. So what are your challenges trying to make that change, and trying to get everybody to kind of see that there's a different way to do things? Hey everyone, it's Chris, the host of Is It Just Speculation? What if I told you that you can make your very own podcast for free, and you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership required? That's Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, and that's what I use. It has all the tools that you need in one place, so you can record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. So you can work on the go, or you can work at home in the comfort of your PJs. That's what I do sometimes. Don't tell nobody though. Anchor also distributes your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more places all around the world within a matter of moments. That's the beauty of Anchor. It really lets you have a message and get it out there. You have your own voice, guys. It's everything that you need to make a podcast in one convenient place. Please download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You're missing out if you don't.
So the first real challenge is for us to show that it's more effective than something else, right?
Mhm.
So if they have these chemicals, we would have to show them that biocontrol is actually more effective. And in some cases, we can show that, but it's not the biggest premise of it. And so even if it's less effective, it will be more sustainable in the long run, for example. And there is this thing in people's minds that doesn't let them really think in the long run,
Mhm.
right? So they think, okay, but for now, I have only this amount of money and I have to use it to protect my plants. I will choose a chemical, right? So
Yeah.
we would have to advocate for it. To it's like with the climate change, right? So
Yeah.
that people could see that the changes that we are making are not beneficial in the long run.
Yeah. And I think there's been a lot of examples of chemicals that ended up being helpful at first, but then you come to realize that there's a lot of downsides.
Oh yeah,
Like
so
Agent
many.
Orange, DDT.
Yeah,
I know there was a long time where people used lead. Like I know that's not, exactly the same thing, but there's things that are beneficial until you
yeah,
realize that there's cost down the road. And even
yeah,
now, people are still trying to clean up those different messes. There's a lot of people that have malformations and birth defects from having Agent Orange in Vietnam. And so there's, always a good part of it until you realize that there's another side of it. And I feel like a lot of even with those big downsides, a lot of the people don't want to change from, using chemicals because they think that, well, it's safe right now. So then, like you said, it's cheaper. But then you end up
yes.
running into issues down the road.
Yeah, yeah. Also, it reminded me of a case
Mhm.
of thalidomide. I don't know if you have heard of it.
I think so, but I don't know exactly what it is.
So thalidomide was a drug used for nausea for pregnant women
Mhm.
in, I believe it was 50s or 60s. Oh, it was just right after the Second World War, so probably 50s.
Okay.
However, then it turned out that children were also with the case of the Agent Orange, they were born with malformations with phocomelia, it's the disease, and yeah, it was just used in pregnant women. How it's not in any way harmful to humans as long as they are not right now just being in a womb, right, and
Yeah.
developing, and it was harmful to the developing fetus. And it turned out that yeah, as maybe this chemical was it was even advertised as being safe, and and being safe for pregnant women. And then it turned out that, oh, it's not really, right? We have
Yeah.
all these children that are really, really badly malformed. And yeah, it was then, of course, taken back, and it's not sold anymore, I think, or only in some cases, but there are specific cases when it's given. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a lot like people who used to say that cigarettes were good for you because they used to have doctors doing advertisements for it. And then, everybody found out that cigarettes
Yes.
are not good for you, but then we still sell them, at least here. You just put an age limit on it, but everybody can get it if you ask somebody that's old enough to get it. And so, like, even with people knowing that there's downsides and still doing it, that's where you run into those problems where you try to change something on a bigger scale, like switching from
Exactly.
chemicals, in the agriculture industry. And then people are okay with the downsides, even if they know about them. I think the most uh, recent one is things like Roundup, where they have,
Yeah.
herbicide pesticides that potentially cause issues if you're exposed to too much of it, or, maybe around it too often. Uh, and yet, you can still go to the dollar store and buy some. So, I think part of the problem is people are just used to having side effects that they don't even question having side effects.
Yes, I mean, also that's the problem is that we ban some substances and we don't ban the other substances.
Mm-hmm.
It's somehow, I can see like a dissonance here, because if we don't ban the other substance, people will never think that it can be harmful for them in a way that the other substance that is banned can
Mm-hmm.
be, right? So we would have to probably have some more consistent policies about it. However, yeah, that's just a huge thing that would have to change, right? Like a revolution, right?
Yeah, and that's a good example because one of the more recent things was BPA. Everybody was like, okay, BPA is
Yes.
bad for you. We're going to ban it. We're going to stop using it. And so now everybody advertises, BPA free. But what did they change it to? A lot of things changed to PET, which I believe still has some of the same side effects. They're just not, they haven't been around long enough to do the studies to prove that they have the side effects.
Yeah, they are not that
Uh,
well documented.
mhm.
Also, science on these things is it's very hard, because working with human subjects, as we know, is very hard to see some side effects. Are um, we develop uh, for a long time. So until we are, for example, 25, our brain still develops, right?
Mhm.
So to see actually any differences between, for example, one group that is somehow that uses something that can be potentially harmful, and a group that doesn't use it, we would have to wait a long time to see the differences and so on. It's very, very hard doing such science. Also, humans are very complex, and all the factors that affect us can affect the studies that we do. So the problems are that the studies that come out, that are actual publications of scientific results, are sometimes contradictory, and
Yeah.
and we can't say for real if it's like because it all comes to statistics. And some say that this compound can have a significant effect on humans, and the other study says that the effect is insignificant.
Yeah.
So
It's
that's really crazy.
it's a lot like, people make fun of the articles where they say, insert whatever thing causes cancer, and then the next time it'll say this helps reduce your odds of getting cancer. It's like everything either
Exactly.
does one thing or that it doesn't do the other thing. But there's not any actual answer to whether it does or doesn't. I think part of the problem is the information comes out so quick because of the internet that you don't ever have a chance to actually go in and do the follow-up studies to verify whatever the result might be. As opposed to, let's say decades ago, you could get the first result, but it's not going to get distributed overnight. It's going to take, putting it in a paper, getting it on maybe like a local newspaper, maybe it makes it to the national news, but it takes time. And then by then you might have some more results that you can back up and say, well, this group of people also did the same study and got the same results. But right now, the information comes out right away. Everybody sees it, shares it, and then automatically it's considered science, even though it might not have been, fully proven.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are both huge benefits of the internet, and for example, for us scientists, we very easily can find if someone, for example, did the things that we are trying to do right now, or if yeah, what are the results and of anything that we actually can think of, right? Not having to have the physical copies of some magazines and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also available for people, as we spoke at the beginning, that can't read the language of science. And the problem is not with what is written in the studies, because I believe that at least 90% of the studies, because not every study, and that's another huge issue in science, that there are some just studies that are not good, right? But
Yeah.
I believe like that 90% of the studies that are published in the uh, journals that are peer reviewed are really good studies, and at least I want to believe that, I think.
Me and you both. Yeah.
Yeah, but the issue is that we can read it. So if we see that there is a significant difference somewhere, for example, there was a significant difference in how this compound acted on rat's liver, right? We will never say that it is how it acts on humans, but what the media will say is that these compounds will kill your liver, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a really big problem. And I was even once collaborating with the spokesman of science in Poland. There is this organization, and we had this science and media conference. And so, yeah, we're trying, but still the media are not looking for science that is, as I said, not black and white. It shows
Yeah.
some part. It oftentimes it's like, okay, it may be or it may not be. There is a lot more research needed, and so on. However, what media do is like, yeah, this is definitely killing you.
Yeah, there's
So
like a sensationalism to it where they just kind of take whatever the idea of the study is and then they just apply it to everything without any nuance, where you can actually tell whether it's actually effective or not. So I think that's a lot of the challenge that you face. And, one of the things that I was wondering is, with microbiology being such a challenging subject, did you ever have any regrets going into that field, or did you ever think maybe I can do something else besides this, or were you always sure that you're going to do microbiology?
I was um, I was very drawn to bacteria at the very beginning of I studied biotechnology. That's the my degree is in biotechnology, my master's, and I was very much drawn to bacteria since the very beginning, and I wanted to work in microbiology. Uh, but sometimes I just think how much easier it would be for me to work in something uh, more like I'm still seeing myself as a scientist, as a
Hmm.
biological scientist, right? But more connected with humans.
Yeah.
That would be just much easier for it's much easier for people to understand working on this, because working on plants, it's just boring for many people, even though it's their crops, the food they eat, right? It's what
Yeah.
we're trying to protect. However, it's not as I'm working on cancer, right? In cancer research, and sometimes I get asked about it by my family, uh, who are asking me. They actually don't know a bit, even a bit.
Hmm.
About the things that I'm doing, and they are just asking me if I have already cured cancer, and I'm like, not really, but I may have improved your maize.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, maybe they'll listen to this podcast and think, "Oh, that's what she does." Like we didn't know. Um, yeah, I had a couple other questions I was wondering about. One of the things we talked about earlier was dry bacteria being able to come back to life. First of
Yeah.
all, is bacteria considered life? Like, do you consider bacteria actual life?
Yes, bacteria are definitely life, unlike viruses, which
Mhm.
are something in between.
Yeah,
We sometimes call them like zombies, for example, because
yeah, that's a good
they
comparison.
they are quite dead but also alive, like Schrodinger's cat, but nobody will
Right.
ever know unless we have a specific one definition of life. However, for bacteria, it's very easy. They are alive because they metabolize, they reproduce, and they reproduce on their own. So they don't need a host organism to reproduce. They just need food.
Are they clones of each other, or are they like asexually reproducing? Like, how does that work?
Bacteria are clones of each other.
Okay.
Most of them, at least as far as I know, maybe there's something that I don't know,
Hmm.
but most of them reproduce asexually. So they just do so-called mitosis,
Hmm.
which you probably remember from biology classes,
Yeah,
and
one of the few things.
and mitochondria probably.
Mhm. It's a powerhouse of the DNA.
Yeah. So we have mitosis and meiosis, and
Hmm.
meiosis is something that the higher organisms do. Bacteria don't do it, and mitosis is just replication of DNA and the split of the cell into two cells, right?
Hmm.
That's what bacteria do, and they are very maybe not easy, but and not simple organisms, because they are much more complex than we can imagine. However, they are easier to study, for example, because of that, than humans, than plants.
Yeah, I think they're used in CRISPR as well. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. At least there is a part of bacteria that is used in the CRISPR method. So there is a protein uh, that is coming from bacteria that is used in this method, and it can just cut DNA in ways that allows us to introduce mutations in specific ways, in specific places of DNA. Uh, and it allows us to do it in also in different organisms. So we just take this system. We don't take the bacteria. We just take the system, these proteins, right?
Hmm.
And we put them. For example, we can have I don't know, cell culture of human cells, right? And we can put these bacteria, not this bacteria, but this system in human cells and introduce mutations in human cells that are growing in a bottle in laboratory, right? No, it's not a human, it's just few cells that are multiplied.
Okay. Going back to the original thing is bacteria
Yeah.
coming back after being dried out. And also if there's any bacteria that you don't know about. One thing I was curious about is if well, as the ice caps are melting, actually, do you know if there's any chance of a newly discovered bacteria that was maybe frozen thousands of years ago from the last ice age that we might discover?
I haven't heard of them yet, but I'm sure there are. I mean, it's like 100% there is something that we don't know about that has been long gone in
Mhm.
and maybe lives in the ice because maybe the ice might be not the best environment because the
Mhm.
enzymes are not really able to work uh, at least in the life on Earth is all based on water, right? So everything that works in us has to be in water. And proteins in bacteria, as far as we know, will not work without water too. And even though they can be so-called extremophiles.
Yeah.
So extremophiles are the bacteria or archaea. It's just a specific type of so-called bacteria that love different temperatures than we do. So there are bacteria that live in geysers, for example, which love hot temperatures. And there are bacteria that can live in the Arctic seas, and
Mhm.
yeah, they just love cold temperatures.
That's actually a good segue into my next question, which is, especially talking about extremophiles.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on extraterrestrial bacteria? If we were to discover something on maybe like an exoplanet or even on the moon or the Mars, now that we have more equipment there and we have more plans of going back to Mars and the moon, um, what are the chances that we'll find bacteria? And, we talked about bacteria being life, but do you think that people would consider that as, okay, that's true life, like that's a whole other different life form besides ours? Or would they just say, well, it's just bacteria?
Oh, we will just panic, I believe. uh, as we don't really know how life can look on other planets. So, for example, we have DNA as the information, right? And then we metabolize sugars, we metabolize proteins, and so on. We know everything that consists life on Earth, but then we can, for example, see that there is life somewhere based on totally different mechanisms, different
Mhm.
compounds. And this would be amazing, and this would be considered probably, maybe we would give it some other name than life because it would be something strange. But if we find something similar to us, uh, I'm sure we will call it life, but we will panic because as a scientist, I think it would be I would love to see it, but
Mhm.
I think that it would be very scary because we don't know if these things wouldn't be pathogenic to us, for example,
Yeah.
and how pathogenic, and if it wouldn't just wipe all the regular life we have on Earth.
Yeah, I think that's a fear for a lot of people. I don't know how true it is, but I always think of it as like, I'm not going to catch a cold from a tree, and a tree's not going to catch a cold from me, or, get some kind of weird disease from me. So maybe extraterrestrial life will probably just be a whole separate thing that doesn't even work with our DNA
Yeah,
or anything that we're used to.
yeah,
Hopefully,
maybe. Hopefully.
right. How excited would you be if, the first life somewhere else is something that you study every day, which is bacteria? I mean, everybody always thinks about it being, another sentient human life form, but I mean, really, the odds are it's probably bacteria or plant
Yeah.
life. Then you can rub it in your family's face.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's, yeah, people think about extraterrestrial life being actual multicellular, I think multicellular
Yeah.
organisms, but yeah, I think that the way in which we evolved from the unicellular microorganisms, and how long it took, and how long it took for the unicellular organisms just to appear on Earth, even. Uh, it would really take a lot to have this coincidence happen again, to have another multicellular organism somewhere, and the unicellular organisms are much more probable, and I would love that. I would be so excited really to see that.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool just to be like, if we saw life and it's something that you study, you'd be like, yes, that's my field. And, maybe they call you to go into space or something.
Oh my god,
um,
I would love that.
would you really love to go to space?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not qualifying for that because of my eye problems and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I would love that. It's amazing. I sometimes watch the footage from ISS live. They are
Yes.
streaming live. I love that.
Me too. I try to watch in the background to see if I see anything weird, flying around.
Some UFOs.
Yeah, something. So to wrap up, what are your final
Yeah.
thoughts?
My final thoughts. Okay, I think that first of all, I love what you're doing because you're bringing just regular scientists or just regular people working in different topics to people, and they can talk about many different things that they know in a way that people probably have never heard of them. So I love what you're doing, and I'm very grateful for being able to do it too with you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I hope that science gets closer to people and that people start thinking in a way maybe that we scientists do. So not black and white, but something in between. That at
Yes.
least there can be something in between.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about, is trying to explore the gray area, because everything is just, usually taken as this or that, but there's a lot of in between that I think never really gets talked about. So, I
Yes.
appreciate you coming on and being a guest. And for those who don't know, you're working on your thesis right now for your PhD. So, I mean,
Yeah,
to
I
get some
am.
time away is pretty rare for you.
Yeah, these days I'm quite busy, but it's been a pleasure to me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
And I hope you have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. Have a lovely day.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the episode. Here's a quick little bonus for you. Basically, me trying to pronounce her name correctly and failing so miserably. So before we get started, I want to make sure I got your name right. Because is it just Marta, or is it like with the Marta?
In Polish, you would read it Marta.
Marta Matuszewska, right? Or is that not close?
Matuszewska. The I know my surname is crazy, but
My wife, I was saying it like over and over for like a whole week straight, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm practicing. So yeah, I'll
it's
definitely
okay.
I have to work on that some more. Maybe next time it'll be better. Hey, just wanted to thank everybody for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. We have a few more guests lined up coming up, so just stay tuned. Make sure you follow on Spotify, Apple. Give a rating if you want. Doesn't have to be 5, but don't make it a 1. And of course, if you want to check out my Instagram, where I usually post some things about my guests afterwards, and sometimes a little bit ahead of time, just to kind of give people hints what might be coming. That's going to be Instagram.com/Chris Garcia, the real one, not the fake one, the real one. So again, that's Chris Garcia, the real one, on Instagram. If you don't know how to look up the podcast with my links, or if you maybe haven't seen the links, you can go to any place where you get podcasts at. Spotify, Apple is probably the go-to. If you go there, you can just type in, "Is it just speculation?" If you still don't know how to find it, go to Google, type in, "Is it just speculation podcast?" If you want to be real specific, "Is it just speculation podcast, Chris Garcia?" So it's there. It's on the web, on the interweb, on the internet, whatever you want to call it. Just go and search it.